Their quarterly Change for Change is going to be ending, and we're going to be starting a new one. Just want to mention that. We have a round table today, and the subject of that round table is
the future of liberal religion.
the future of liberal religion. Okay. We used to have a lot of people loved going to round table, and I'm not sure how it's doing now. Is it doing real well? Well, however, it used to be a real fun thing here, and that's held over in the library. At what it's like
11:30 in the library.
11:30, and the air conditioning's working in there now. Not so much working in the lobby, working in here and in the. Okay. I want to add another one that I got was today in the Tombaugh Gallery, the Potters Guild of Las Cruces is presenting Fire and Fiber at 11:30 a.m. It's going to be the second to last Sunday that you can go see that exhibit.
Go to the round table first.
Go to the round table first. Last thing I want to say is remember to put your phones in silent or worship mode. Okay, I'll come back at right now. So this is the start of our service. Would you please rise in body or spirit as we begin our service with the singing of our gathering song, We Gather Together, number 349 in the gray hymnal. The words are on the screen above. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces. We welcome you whether you are here in the sanctuary, especially the children, or joining us via YouTube. I'm Mark Sukontarak, your service associate. Our minister, Reverend Rod Thompson, is not in the pulpit today. Instead, Katie Fitzgerald will be our service leader. Nancy and David Carlson will be providing beautiful and inspirational music. Our Director of Religious Education, Kelly Ingram, is here today. There she is, okay. And Elwyn Nunn will be doing camera, and Claire Neal Wallace is going to be doing audio and correcting me when I speak too soon, right? Mike Yaxko will be connecting us to our YouTube attendees. Diane Lee and Jillian Lang, as always, have prepared a beautiful and appropriate chalice table. Our greeters today are Peggy Devlin, Carol Cassavant, and Greg White. We want attendees, new and old, to feel noticed and to be aware that this is an open and welcoming community. Our greeters are focusing on that. You can be too. It takes some courage for folks to come to a service for the first time. So step up and let them know you care. Hospitality is offered today by the Richens Covenant Group. They have arranged for coffee, light food, and conversation to be enjoyed by all inside and outside the RE building just down the breezeway. After service, of course. We are delighted to be with you today. If you are visiting us, we'd like to meet you. If you're willing, would you please raise your hand or rise in body or spirit to introduce yourself by telling us your name and where you're from. And if you wish, a little about why you came. But wait until I bring the mic to you. Do we have any visitors? Yay! I'm waiting. It's on now? Okay. I didn't pass it. Let me know if I passed anybody. Hi.
Good morning. I'm Ann Inzy. I live here in Mesilla. I've lived here for a couple of years, moved from Albuquerque. And one of my dearest friends, Talisha, is visiting here from Missouri.
Yes, I am from the Ozarks, and I'm visiting Ann. We met in Albuquerque about 25 years ago in graduate school, and so we're just excited to be here. I've attended the Unitarian Church in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, years ago, and we just are curious and interested in coming today.
Very cool. Thank you. Do we have any more brave visitors? I didn't see anybody yet. Looking around, though. Okay. Okay. Let me go into my script more here. Thank you and welcome. We are glad that you have joined us this morning. Do you have the mic? Be sure to fill out a welcome card or provide your email to us so we can invite you to our many other services and activities. Shy visitors can fill welcome cards out also to receive all those invitations. Unitarian Universalism has no creed or dogma. I always repeat this so people know. We are a covenant-based church, meaning that we agree to live in relationship with each other according to the Unitarian Universalist principles and our congregation's covenant of right relations. We embrace diversity in all its forms. Everyone is welcome. You can learn more about our church at our website, UUCLC.org.
Good morning. It's great to see all of you here in the sanctuary, and I welcome all of those who are viewing us on YouTube. I hope that in some measure you can take with you a spiritual nugget from today's service. And for today's opening words, I have chosen not to use a reading from a UU minister or a poem or a verse from some well-known philosopher. Instead, I want to share with you a personal anecdote taking you back over 40 years ago to a time when I was single. I was established in my profession, had enough income that I felt that I could nurture a child, so I decided to be trained as a foster parent. I had my home inspected. I passed. And I just had to wait. And any of you who know me well know that that was no small matter. But one morning in November, I got a call. Katie, we have a child for you. Actually, she's an 11-year-old girl, Michelle. She's been on her own for the last 3 days, caring for her 3-year-old half-sister because her mother has gone walkabout. No one knows where her mother is, and she has no maternal relatives in this country. She's only been in the United States for a few months. She comes from Jamaica. Will you take her? I said, of course, I'll take her. Where do I come? I'll be right there. I let my boss know. My boss knew this day was coming. And I let my friends and family know. I could not wait. And one of my friends, Sharon, also a single lady, invited us to McDonald's for supper. Well, you know, that fits a single lady's budget, so I accepted on behalf of Michelle and I. And when we got to the restaurant, I introduced Michelle to Sharon and Sharon to Michelle, and we did a little back and forth chit-chat. And after a while, I encouraged Michelle to go to the restroom, wash her hands, get ready for dinner, and that gave Sharon and I a little chance to talk, adult to adult. And Sharon looked at me and she said, Katie, she's black. And I said, well, yeah, I told you she came from Jamaica, didn't I? And then Sharon said, well, people will think she's yours. She is mine. Well, she's mine for until her mom gets back, or as long as the foster people will let her let me have her, or until other family steps up, she will be mine. Now, looking back over the last 4 decades, I wish that at the time I had a greater ability to bridge the gap between where Sharon was coming from and where I was. Sharon saw color. I saw a child in need. After that, our friendship, Sharon and my friendship, withered. It was never the same. And I regret that, because there were elements of Sharon's personality that I admired and respected a great deal. These opening words are the nexus of our service today, finding ways to look at who we are and our own belief systems and our own personal idiosyncrasies, and trying to purge, if we can, those things that might serve as barriers to having the fullest and richest relationships with one another.
It's time for the chalice lighting. I wasn't nearly as creative as you in coming up with a chalice lighting, so I grabbed one, but it fit really nicely. It's different yet united by. Is that
Uribe Lichty?
By Uribe Lichty. We come from many places, along different paths, bringing different truths. We come with different histories and different realities, in it we come together as one people, with faith that we can use our differences to heal ourselves and each other, to bring wholeness to a fractured world. We come seeking to find community, to find acceptance of who we are. In this place, we may find others who are much like us, and we may find others who are much different. May our lit chalice remind us that we are a people taught by different stories with many voices, but always one people working for a world where love creates justice, and justice gives birth to peace. Please rise and body your spirit to join me in saying our church's affirmation of covenant and in singing the doxology in English and Spanish. The words are on the screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Your turn, Kelly.
Good morning, church. Today I'll be reading the story God's Hat. Once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went straight through the center of town. One day, something strange happened. God walked down that road, and she was beautiful. She wore a long, flowing robe, and on top of her head, there was a wonderful hat. All the people stopped to stare at God as she walked by, and they kept staring until she disappeared in the distance. "Boy, God sure was beautiful," said one man, "and what a beautiful blue hat she had on." "Yes, God was beautiful," said a woman from the other side of the street. "But it wasn't a blue hat she was wearing. It was a red hat." "You are wrong," said the man. "It was definitely a blue hat." "No, you're wrong," said the woman. "It was definitely a red hat." As the two argued, others joined in the dispute. Soon the whole village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat. All the people on the other side of the road were certain God was wearing a red hat. People got mad and started screaming at each other. Finally, the people got so angry they decided to build a wall that went straight down the center of town. From that point on, the people on one side of the wall were enemies with the people who lived on the other side of the wall, and they never spoke to each other. On one side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a blue hat. On the other side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a God who wore a red hat. Many years passed, and the people were still enemies. Then one day, God came walking back through that village. She was smiling and balancing on top of the wall that the people had built many years ago. This time, she was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran to the wall and cried, "You must settle our argument." "Yes," said one man. "The people on that side of the street say when you walked through the village many years ago, you were wearing a blue hat. But we know better. We know that you were wearing a red hat. So tell us, God, please, what color was your hat?" God looked puzzled for a moment and began to scratch her head and thought, "I think I remember walking through this village many years ago," said God. "And on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat that is blue on one side and red on the other." And saying nothing more, God continued walking down the wall until she disappeared off into the distance. It was very quiet in the village. Suddenly, there was the sound of one child laughing. Then another child started laughing, and another. Soon the whole village was roaring with laughter. Everyone was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been. As the sound of laughter grew louder and louder, the wall began to shake and crumble until finally it came tumbling down. For many, many years after that day, the people told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down the wall between a divided and foolish people. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
May your mind
Be open to new learning. Please rise in body or spirit to sing our opening hymn, With Heart and Mind, number 300 in the gray hymnal. The words are on the screen above. I didn't know that one. Okay.
For our meditation today, I have The Cathedral of the World, written by Forrest Church, a famed UU minister. This was printed in the UU magazine in the year 2009. Imagine awakening one morning from a deep and dreamless sleep to find yourself in the nave of a vast cathedral, like a child newborn, untutored save to moisture, nurture, rhythm, and the profound comforts at the heart of darkness. You open your eyes unto a world unseen, indeed unimaginable before. It is a world of light and dancing shadow, stone and glass, life and death. This second birth, at once miraculous and natural, is in some ways not unlike the first, a new awakening. It consecrates your life with sacraments of pain you do not understand. and promise joy you will never fully call your own. Such awakenings may happen only once in a lifetime or many times. But when they do, what before you took for granted is presented as a gift, difficult yet precious and good. Not that you know what to do with your gift or even what it really means, only how much it matters. Awakening to the call stirring deep within you, the call of life itself, the call of the Spirit. You begin your pilgrimage. Before you do, look about you, contemplate the mystery, and contemplate with awe. This cathedral is as ancient as humankind. Its cornerstone, the first altar, marked with a tincture of blood and blessed by tears. Search for a lifetime, which is all you are surely given, and you shall never know its limits. Visit all its transepts, worship at its myriad shrines, nor span its celestial ceiling with your gaze. The builders have worked from time immemorial, destroying and creating, confounding and perfecting, tearing down and raising up arches in this cathedral, buttresses and chapels, organs, theaters and chancels, gargoyles, idols and icons. Not a moment passes without work being begun that shall not be finished in the lifetime of the architects who planned it, the patrons who paid for it, the builders who construct it, or the expectant worshipers. Throughout human history, one generation after another has labored lovingly, sometimes fearfully, crafting memorials and consecrating shrines. Untold members of these today collect dust in long, undisturbed chambers. Others cast centuries or eons ago from their once respected places, lie shattered in shards or ground into dust on the cathedral floor. Not a moment passes without the dreams of long-dead dreamers being outstripped, crushed, or abandoned, giving way to new visions, each immortal in reach, ephemeral in grasp. Welcome to the cathedral of the world. Above all else, contemplate the windows. In the cathedral of the world, there are windows beyond number, some long forgotten, covered with patinas of dust, others revered by millions, the most sacred of shrines. Each in its own way is beautiful. Some are abstract, others are representational, some dark and meditative, others bright and dazzling. Each tells a story about the creation of the world, the meaning of history, the purpose of life, the nature of humankind, the mystery of death. The windows of the cathedral are where the light shines through. As with all extended metaphors for meaning, this one is imperfect. The light of God, or truth, or being itself, call it what you will, shines not only upon us, but out from within us as well. Together with the windows, we are part of the cathedral, not apart from it. Together, we comprise an interdependent web of being. The cathedral is constructed out of star stuff, and so are we. We are that part, that known part of the creation that contemplates itself, part of the poem that we ponder. Because the cathedral is so vast, our life so short, and our vision so dim, we are able to contemplate only a tiny part of the cathedral, explore a few apses, reflect upon the play of light and darkness through a few of its myriad windows. Yet, since the whole, holographically or organically, is contained in each of the parts. As we ponder and act on the insight from our ruminations, we may discover insights that will invest our days with meaning and our lives with purpose. A 21st century theology based on the concept of one light and many windows offers to its adherents both breadth and focus. Honoring many different religious approaches, it only excludes the truth claims of absolutists. That is because fundamentalists claim that the light shines through their windows only. Some go so far as to beseech their followers to throw stones through other people's windows. Skeptics draw the opposite conclusion. Seeing the bewildering variety of windows and observing the folly of the worshipers, they conclude that there is no light. But the windows are not the light. They are where the light shines through. We shall never see the light directly, only as refracted through the windows of the cathedral. Prompting humility, life's mystery lies hidden. Beyond knowledge, most ample ken. The light of God, truth, is veiled. Yet, that we can encompass with our minds the universe that encompasses us is a great cause for great wonder. I humbly stand in the cathedral of the world with awe.
One of the ways we support one another in community is through the sharing of joys, sorrows, and milestones. In these challenging times, it is critical that we make attempts to stay connected to one another. If you have a joy, sorrow, or milestone you'd like to share with the congregation, please raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you. State your name and what's in your heart. What? Someone in the back does have the key. Are there any joys, sorrows, or milestones this morning?
Hi, I'm Kevin, and I've got a sorrow and a bit of a warning to share. On Tuesday, hackers got into my account and drained my entire checking account of $1,800 with a bit of assistance from me. They had fooled me into thinking that they were Wells Fargo Fraud Division. The caller ID said Wells Fargo. The number that they had on there and suggested I Google was Wells Fargo's Fraud Department in Chandler. And I gave them information that made it possible. So I had misgivings, so I did call fraud after I got off the line with them, and they said, you know, they had not used my card in Houston, and they had not contacted us, and so I said, okay, we need to cancel our cards, because I did give them some information, order new cards. Well, those little weasels were still in my account, and they got my new cards sent to Houston. So when the cards arrived in Houston, they went to an ATM and drained it out completely. So my advice to you is if you get a call from your bank's fraud department, thank them, hang up, and actually call fraud yourself to verify what's going on.
You wanted to give them the number? I'm sorry that happened.
It's just, you know,
Beware.
the bank will give our money back, but it's just going to take some time.
Yeah.
I have a sorrow and a joy. My cousin, Divine Constance Williams, passed on, and she was just like my sister. She was my mother's, and her mother were sisters. And so she passed on. She had a hip operation, and then she fell, and that was just last week, and so she's gone to the other side. Thank you. And the joy is that we had fun while we were younger. I lived with my aunt, and you know, we just had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, my name is Jan, and I have a couple of joys. The first one is that I have adopted 2 little kittens, and I am very entertained by the interchange between my 4-year-old cat and the kittens. It's getting better, but the kittens are redecorating my house. I have another joy. This week has been General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and your delegates have been diligent in attending sessions. There were several votes taken yesterday, including whether or not to adopt the proposed changes to Article 2. We don't know the results of yesterday's votes, but we do know the results of votes taken the day before that on a business resolution. And I hope you will join in my joy that it was overwhelmingly accepted that the resolution embracing transgender, non-binary, and intersex people is a fundamental expression of UU religious values.
I'm concerned that we're going to have to change some of my intro thing there for some of the changes. Okay, first, and I'll come to you.
My name is Lucy, and I also am a delegate to the UUA General Assembly, and it's just been mind-opening and really heartwarming to see the attendance and participation in this virtual event. Well, I guess it's hybrid, right? Some people are in person. It's virtual, okay. Well, we're attending virtually. But yes, it's been really wonderful. I've had the experience of attending in person in the past, pre-COVID, as a member of another congregation. But yeah, this has been a great reminder of the widespread experience that we all share, and that also just how our values and that exist and live in this world. So that's been great. I also ask for your attention to a family member who is recovering from an accident with brain bleeds and a collapsed lung. So.
I hope that all of you join in my sorrow as I read the news of brothers and sisters in faith who on pilgrimages have suffered and died due to the extreme heat. Again, we can't control the climate, but we can hold in our hearts those who suffer from its consequences and the climate change.
Did I miss anybody? Okay. I light this candle for the joys and sorrows expressed today and for those you hold in your hearts. We all hold hopes and dreams, wounds and worries in our hearts. Remembering this, let us treat one another with patience and love. Thank you, Katie. I have to figure out that new candle lighter. Out of your way here.
If you have a gray hymnal, I hope you will turn to page 464. If you don't, just watch the screen. We have a responsive reading entitled, "And Then." And then all that has divided us will merge. And then compassion will be wedded to power. And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then both women and men will be strong. And then all will be rich and free and varied. and then all will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth. May it be so. Our lives, our church, our cultures are comprised of many overlapping stories. In the TED Talk video we're going to view shortly, the novelist Chimamanda Adichie tells the story of how she found her authentic cultural voice and warns that if we hear only one single story about another person or country, we risk a critical misunderstanding. Too often, we make surface judgments about others without taking the time or opportunity to get to know them better.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. and they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow, we ate mangoes, and we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Laye, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination, they opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this: it saved me from having a single story of what books are. I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, live-in domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me, as an African, was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. I must say that before I went to the US, I didn't consciously identify as African. But in the US, whenever Africa came up, people turned to me, never mind that I knew nothing about places like Namibia. But I did come to embrace this new identity, and in many ways, I think of myself now as African, although I still get quite irritable when Africa is referred to as a country, the most recent example being my otherwise wonderful flight from Lagos 2 days ago, in which there was an announcement on the Virgin flight about their charity walk in India, Africa, and other countries. So after I had spent some years in the US as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. if I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner. I would see Africans in the same way that I, as a child, had seen Fide's family. This single story of Africa ultimately comes, I think, from Western literature. Now, here's a quote from the writing of a London merchant called John Locke, who sailed to West Africa in 1561 and kept a fascinating account of his voyage. After referring to the black Africans as beasts who have no houses, he writes, "They are also people without heads, having their mouths and eyes in their breasts." Now, I've laughed every time I've read this, and one must admire the imagination of John Locke. But what is important about his writing is that it represents the beginning of a tradition of telling African stories in the West, a tradition of sub-Saharan Africa as a place of negatives, of difference, of darkness, of people who, in the words of the wonderful poet Rudyard Kipling, are half devil, half child. And so I began to realize that my American roommate must have, throughout her life, seen and heard different versions of this single story. As had a professor who once told me that my novel was not authentically African. Now, I was quite willing to contend that there were a number of things wrong with the novel, that it had failed in a number of places, but I had not quite imagined that it had failed at achieving something called African authenticity. In fact, I did not know what African authenticity was. The professor told me that my characters were too much like him, an educated and middle-class man. My characters drove cars. They were not starving. Therefore, they were not authentically African. But I must quickly add that I too am just as guilty on the question of the single story. A few years ago, I visited Mexico from the US. The political climate in the US at the time was tense, and there were debates going on about immigration. And, as often happens in America, immigration became synonymous with Mexicans. There were endless stories of Mexicans as people who were fleecing the healthcare system, sneaking across the border, being arrested at the border, that sort of thing. I remember walking around on my first day in Guadalajara, watching the people going to work, rolling up tortillas in the marketplace, smoking, laughing. I remember first feeling slight surprise, and then I was overwhelmed with shame. I realized that I had been so immersed in the media coverage of Mexicans that they had become one thing in my mind, the abject immigrant. I had bought into the single story of Mexicans, and I could not have been more ashamed of myself. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become.
Sorry, I got a closer. To me, the beauty of being a UU is that there are no credos or commandments. The challenge of being a UU is accepting all, even those that we violently disagree with. Sometimes that requires the difficult work of unpacking and dealing with a lifetime of baggage, of preconceived notions, of fighting stereotypes. We could decide to leave the baggage by the side of the road and ignore the lifetime of experiences, etc. Or, heaven forbid, we could choose to keep carrying the baggage and let some of those old habits get in the way of true acceptance of others, of having rich and full relationships with those we're called to love.
The operations and outreach of our church needs your input and your contributions. This is the perfect time to think about what you can give back. In a moment, the greeters will pass the offering baskets around. But before they do that, I should remind you that we support organizations identified by the Social Justice Committee with our Change for Change program. This quarter's recipient for our Change for Change donations is Mesilla Valley Court-Appointed Special Advocates, or CASA. You can give to them by putting your change in the basket or by writing Change for Change on the note line of your check. Please give generously.
Nights are cool, and I'm a fool. The stars a pool of water, cool water. But with the dawn, I'll wake and yawn and carry on to water. Cool, clear water. Keep a-moving, Dan, don't you listen to him, Dan. He's a devil, not a man, and he fills the burning sand with water. Dan, can you see that big green tree where the water's running free and it's waiting there for you and me?
That was neat. Please rise in body or spirit for the singing of our closing hymn. Here we have gathered, number 360 in the gray hymnal. Words are on the screen above.
Circle of kinship,
Our closing words from Barbara Cheatham. Bring happiness. And now we take our leave. Before we gather here again, may each of us bring happiness into another's life. May we each be surprised by the gifts that surround us. May each of us be enlivened by constant curiosity, and may we remain together in spirit till the hour we meet again.
Please join me in saying the words to extinguish the flame. The words are on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Yay.
That's it.